today we're going to be talking about running shoes and how long they last. Running shoes are really getting quite expensive. I don't know about you, but I find every time I go to the shops, I'm having to rethink my budget and actually just having to think, do I really want to put that much money into that shoe? So since these shoes are an investment, today we're going to be talking to you about how much mileage you can expect to get out of each pair of running shoes that you own.
The reality is that while the modern shoe is way more comfortable than shoes used to be, the materials that they use to make that shoe so much more comfortable, the outers, the foam soles, all of the rubbers and the polymers that they use to make those shoes as soft and as comfortable as they are now mean that the modern running shoe is not as robust as shoes used to be. Of course, there are lots of benefits to that. The most important benefit of how much more comfortable and foot-friendly modern shoes have become is that, generally speaking, you could take a shoe straight out of the store and hit the pavement, and there's no need to wear shoes in anymore. Of course, we always recommend that people use shoes before they get to race day, and you don't go and buy a pair of shoes and take it straight to a race, specifically because, like anything else, a shoe can have a factory fault in it, and you don't want to find that out on race day. So in the past, we used to have to spend a good 50 to 100 kilometers of a shoe's early life just running it in, getting that shoe comfortable, getting it softer so that you didn't blister and chafe and rub too hard. The great news is that the modern shoe doesn't require that. It's ready to go straight away. It's much more comfortable. Blistering is much less of a problem than it ever used to be in a shoe. But of course, the downside to that is that we do need to replace those shoes more often. We'll talk about that later in the video.
So I'm sure you've seen when you go into a running shop that not all shoes are the same, based just on the variety of shoes you get from the different brands and the different manufacturers. Broadly speaking, you get two types of shoes. You're going to get daily trainers, shoes that are meant to be doing the bulk of your training in, and on the other end of the spectrum you get what we call racing flats or racing shoes, which are much lighter and are designed mostly for speed. Now, of course, these aren't the only broad categories. There are variations in between. So when you look at the daily trainers, you can get high mileage shoes that are designed for long runs. You know, the ultra runners love these shoes. And then you get other shoes that are a little bit lighter, just meant for your normal day-to-day sort of 1 hour runs that you do. These shoes are designed to take on the impact of a large volume of running, either in a single run or over a much longer space of time. So these shoes are going to be built with thicker midsoles, with more cushioning, thick outsoles, and nice comfy uppers. And these shoes will obviously last a little bit longer. On the other side of things, you've got the racing flats. These shoes are designed for speed. When you go out and you race, you don't want to be lugging around 350 grams on your feet, so you find these shoes can weigh as little as 120 grams, 100 grams even, with very thin uppers, thin midsoles, usually very low drop, and these shoes are designed exclusively for speed, and they tend to last very short periods of times. And you don't want to be doing much of your training in these shoes. You might do maybe 1 or 2 track sessions, a tempo run here and there, but the bulk of it is going to be used when you go out there and you finish your racing plan and you're going to go out and race. We can also just talk a little bit about trail shoes. If you think about trail running, the terrain is a little bit softer than what you expect from the road and running on asphalt and on track, but the terrain itself is actually quite rugged. There's rocks, there's thorns, there's all of the elements. So these shoes are more designed to protect you from not just the environment itself, whether it be snowing, raining, or whatever, but also from the elements, stones, rocks, and things like that. So these shoes tend to be a little bit more rugged. They tend to be more grippy than road shoes, and you actually find these shoes might actually last a little bit longer.
Let's talk about biomechanics. This is, of course, going to have an effect on how long your shoes last for. If you are someone who is a lot faster, you're going to have a sort of more forefoot or midfoot kind of strike that's going to have an impact on the way your shoe degenerates over time. It's something that we can't really change too much unless we're doing specific strength training or specific gait retraining, but just know that this is something that affects your the lasting duration of your shoes. One other important thing that affects the biomechanics of your shoes is where you run. So if you are running on the camber of the road, make sure that you turn around and run on the opposite side so that you're not constantly degenerating your right foot on that camber. Make sure you turn around and run back on the camber, and you're not constantly running on the camber of the road, so that your one shoe is constantly taking a lot more sort of effects of degeneration.
One of the things that will impact on how often you need to replace a shoe is the kind of terrain that you are running on. If you are running on tar or on asphalt, cement paths, those shoes will obviously wear out much quicker than if you train predominantly fell running, grass, trail running, dirt roads. So the surface that you're running on will definitely contribute to how quickly the outer wears out. And once you wear through the outer sole into the midsole, it is time to replace a pair of shoes, regardless of how well the upper is doing, regardless of how good the midsole looks.
Really important aspect in looking after or allowing your shoes to last for as long as possible is the way you look after your shoes. Okay, so yes, we don't want to be running in dirty shoes, and it's not nice to have that, so we want to clean our shoes. But if you just shove them into the washing machine and let them go all crazy in that washing machine, you're really going to degenerate the materials and the textiles that Lindsay spoke about earlier, and essentially the composition of the sole. If you are going to wash them, a bit of a hand wash is probably much better than throwing them into the washing machine. I also like to, at the end of a run, take the sort of inners out, just allow them to breathe a little bit, and really just look after the shape of the shoe. So that is really important. It's going to help your shoes last a lot longer. Aside from washing your shoes, the other way we want to make sure that we really look after our shoes is how we dry them. So you've been running and it's raining and now your shoes are soaked. You don't want to just shove them into a tumble dryer for the same reason we don't want to put them in a washing machine. We want to look after the shape and the care of those materials. And you also really don't want to put them in front of a fire. So make sure that you allow them to dry naturally and that the natural shape of the shoe falls back into place.
Let's talk practical numbers. Typically, a modern shoe should get around 800 to maximum 1,000 kilometers or 500 to 600 miles out of a pair of shoes. We've spoken about a lot of the things that impact on that, depending on what type of shoe it is, racer, trainer, shoe care, etc. But one of the other things that will really impact how long a shoe lasts is physical weight. Okay, so we typically find that females will be able to go a little bit further and longer in a pair of shoes, and that 800 to 1,000 range is typically for your, let's call it 70 kg male runner. So females might get a little bit more out of their shoes, but as you get heavier beyond that 70, get 75, 80 and 90 kilograms, you do want to start looking at your shoes when you get to around the 400 mile mark, the 650 kilometer mark, and really just make sure that you haven't worn through that outer, that the inner hasn't blown out, to make sure that you don't predispose yourself to things like shin splints, and that you are replacing those shoes regularly and looking after your feet. It's all well and good knowing how many miles to run in a pair of shoes, but if you're in the wrong pair of shoes, you'll end up having to buy a new pair, or worse, being injured and unable to run. To find out how to get the perfect pair of shoes, watch this video.